I'm leaving, Marcus Trent announced, standing at the head of our Thanksgiving table in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His wine glass was raised like he was proposing a toast. I'm in love with my assistant. The room froze. The turkey grew cold. An eerie silence blanketed the dining room. Our 23-year-old son, Jeremy, sat motionless, his fork suspended midair. Our daughter, Elise, barely 20, stared at her plate, transfixed by the swirl of cranberry sauce as if it might offer an escape. My older sister, Lorraine, gasped audibly. Her husband, Frank, kept his eyes glued to his napkin like it was the most fascinating object in the room. She's 22, Marcus added, chest puffed like her youth alone was a badge of honor. And she's everything you're not, Camille. I set my fork down with practiced calm, folded my napkin, and placed it gently beside my plate. I looked at the man I had spent 27 years building a life with and felt the weight of every moment crash into me. Well, good timing, Marcus, I said, my voice even though my pulse thundered in my ears. Truly. I'm Camille Trent. I'm 54 years old and a senior auditor at Lark and Quinn CPA Group here in Santa Fe. For nearly 3 decades, I've balanced financial reports during the day and raised a family at night. I thought I had built a stable life with Marcus, our 2 children, our little Adobe-style home tucked off Canyon Road, our quiet routines. My dream was simple: to grow old with my husband, watch our children create their own futures, and maybe, someday, travel together, just the 2 of us, free from obligations. But apparently, standing in my way now was Marcus's textbook midlife crisis, dressed up as his assistant, Tiffany, a recent hire he brought on just this past summer at his independent mortgage office. The betrayal hurt, yes. But worse was the public humiliation. He chose today, Thanksgiving, with our children and relatives present, to unveil his departure like it was some sort of holiday gift. As if daring me to react. As if he wanted a scene. We'll work out the details later, Marcus said, swirling his wine like a condescending judge. To new beginnings. He toasted the air. No one lifted their glass. Elise abruptly stood and fled the room in tears. Jeremy stared at his father, rage and disbelief flickering across his face. I think you should leave, I said evenly, refusing to let him provoke an outburst. It's still my house too, Marcus replied smugly. The way he said it, you could tell, he'd already done the math, calculated what he thought was his edge. I'll pack some things tomorrow. As our family shuffled away awkwardly, mumbling excuses and grabbing coats, Marcus disappeared into his study with what remained of the wine. I began clearing plates, hands moving automatically while my mind wrestled with the jagged edges of a life just shattered. Then I noticed the answering machine blinking in the kitchen. I pressed play. Camille, this is Richard Owens, from my late uncle's law firm. I need to speak with you about your Uncle Charles's estate. There are some surprising developments. Please call me when you can. Uncle Charles. My mom's older brother. A bit of an eccentric, lifelong bachelor, and a successful land developer out in Scottsdale. He passed away a few weeks earlier. Growing up, I was his shadow during family visits. He always said I was the one who had the brains to run an empire. But I never expected anything from his will. Maybe a keepsake. A letter. Certainly not something significant. As it turned out, Marcus's dramatic Thanksgiving declaration was about to be upstaged by something far more impactful. Marcus and I met in our last year at Arizona State. He was funny, charming, and full of wild plans. I was cautious, organized, already networking for internships. Somehow it worked. We got married at 27, once I'd secured my CPA license and he'd scraped together enough to open his business. The first years were tough, but we were happy. We pinched pennies, celebrated tiny milestones, and slowly built a life. We saved for our home. We built a family. But while I built a future, he found an exit. And maybe, just maybe, I'd been given a better one. Our Adobe home off Canyon Road was our dream project, a charming fixer-upper built in the 1940s. It had quirks and flaws, but it was ours. For nearly a decade, weekends were spent sanding floors, painting walls, and learning the true meaning of sweat equity. I took only 6 weeks of maternity leave with each child, then returned to work full-time, balancing spreadsheets by day and diaper duty by night. As Marcus's mortgage business gained traction, so did his ambitions. His small office eventually relocated to a sleek space in the heart of downtown. The man who once shopped clearance racks at Kohl's now wore custom-fitted suits and designer loafers. He joined the Santa Fe Country Club, not for tennis or golf, which he barely touched, but for the schmoozing. Networking. High net worth clients. I supported him through it all. Every step. I believed these efforts were joint investments in our future. Meanwhile, my own career moved forward in a steadier, quieter rhythm. I wasn't flashy, but I was consistent. Known for my meticulous work and rock-solid ethics, I eventually earned senior auditor status at Lark & Quinn. My salary, reliable and recession-proof, kept us afloat during the inevitable dry spells in Marcus's commission-dependent income. My Uncle Charles, God rest him, always said I was the ant preparing for winter while others danced through summer. "You're the ant to all those grasshoppers," he teased during our monthly lunches. When his health declined, pancreatic cancer, I made time every week to bring him meals, sit with him, listen. I thought I was simply doing the right thing. I didn't realize how much he valued it. Looking back, I can trace the unraveling. The sharp critiques about my practical wardrobe, his sudden obsession with getting in shape at 51. The impulse purchase of a cherry red convertible he didn't even discuss with me. Late office nights that left his shirts scented with unfamiliar perfume. They were clichés, yes, but painful ones. Still, I dismissed them. We had history, after all. Men go through phases, my sister Lorraine said when I voiced my worries. Remember when Uncle Charles bought that sailboat and never learned to sail? So I waited. I chose patience over confrontation. I told myself 27 years of marriage earned a little grace. Even when Marcus mentioned hiring Tiffany, describing her as sharp and intuitive, though she was barely older than Elise, I swallowed my unease. 2 weeks ago, I stopped by his office unannounced with takeout from his favorite cafe. The receptionist gave me a sympathetic smile. That should have warned me. His door was closed. Laughter filtered through the frosted glass. I stood there frozen, hand trembling as I clutched the brown bag of food. I left it with the receptionist and drove back to my firm in silence, choosing trust over suspicion, loyalty over evidence. Now, watching Marcus pour himself another glass of wine in the ruins of our Thanksgiving, I realized maybe the man I'd been loyal to never truly existed. The morning after dawned bright and cold, typical of a high-desert November. I'd barely slept, having camped out on the living room couch. Marcus had come to bed sometime after midnight, judging by the empty bottle he'd left behind. I brewed coffee and called Richard Owens's office, leaving a message with his secretary. Then, still in yesterday's clothes, I trudged upstairs to change. That's when I saw Marcus already packing. "Tiffany's place is too small for both of us," he said casually, tossing dress shirts into his luggage. "I'll be at the Parkview Hotel until we find something suitable." We. That word burned more than I thought possible. "When did it start?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Marcus paused, glancing over at me, a flicker of shame, or perhaps annoyance, in his eyes. "Does it matter?" he said, with a sigh. 27 years of marriage, Camille. People change. "Yes," I said, my gaze cool. "And some of us evolve. Others just regress." He had no reply. And I no longer needed one. 27 years of marriage deserves at least honesty about its end, I said quietly. Marcus sighed and sat heavily on the edge of the bed we'd once shared like it still belonged to us both. "It started in July," he muttered. "At the company picnic. She was interested, attentive." He wouldn't look at me, but his voice sharpened with defensive heat. Do you know how long it's been since you asked me about my ideas? My plans? Camille. Tiffany listens. She gets excited about what I'm building. She's 22, I replied flatly. At 22, everything is exciting. Even breakfast cereal. It's not just her age, he insisted. She sees me. The me I used to be before life buried me under mortgage payments, college tuition, retirement plans, and your endless spreadsheets. I studied him, this man who once chased dreams with me in our beat-up college car. Now his once sandy hair was dyed too dark for his complexion. The watch on his wrist was a Rolex, not the leather one I gave him on our 10th anniversary. His new designer blazer was tailored tight across the stomach he pretended not to have. Who is he now? What kind of man throws away a quarter-century for flattery? I think what hurts most, I said evenly, is that you didn't respect me enough to end this privately. Marcus's jaw twitched. For a moment, he looked ashamed. Then, just as quickly, the expression vanished. I needed witnesses. Your family needed to understand this isn't some phase or fling. This is real. That's when it hit me. His public Thanksgiving announcement, the calculated timing, the performative wine toast. It was all a ploy. He didn't want me to fight. He wanted out, and he wanted everyone to think he'd tried to do it honorably. If I'd objected, it would seem like I was the one in denial. I see, I said, more to myself than to him. Just then, the doorbell rang. I left Marcus on the bed and made my way downstairs. A courier stood on the porch with a clipboard and a certified envelope. Camille Trent, he asked. I signed without a word. Back in the kitchen, I opened the envelope and scanned the crisp legal document. My breath caught. Sole beneficiary. Controlling interest. Comprehensive portfolio. $4.7 million. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Uncle Charles, my late uncle who never bragged, who wore the same jacket for a decade, who once said, "Never confuse modesty with weakness," had left me everything. His real estate assets, his private investments, even his philanthropic foundation. It was all mine. And more importantly, it was mine alone. The estate had been structured as separate property, post-marriage, and legally designated as mine, not part of any shared marital assets. My name, my signature, my future. Tucked behind the letter was a handwritten note in Uncle Charles's neat script. Camille, you've always had grit and grace. Life tests both. Consider this your safety net and your wings. I know you'll use it wisely. Charles. Had he known? Or suspected? Had he read between the lines of my quiet worries over lunch? Or seen something in Marcus I hadn't yet let myself admit? Upstairs, I heard Marcus's voice echoing through the walls, lively, free, boastful. He was telling someone, probably Tiffany, about how liberated he felt. I didn't feel liberated. Not yet. But I did feel clear. No more confusion. No more waiting. No more negotiating over someone who had already left. I folded the documents carefully, placed them in my purse, and made a mental checklist. New accounts, legal counsel, financial strategy, estate planning. Marcus's departure had been loud and dramatic. Mine would be silent and final. When Marcus finally rolled his suitcase out the front door, he didn't look back. And I didn't stop him. The moment the door clicked shut, I called Richard Owens. Camille, he said warmly, I'm so glad you reached out. Your uncle had very specific wishes. He wanted you to have the freedom to choose your next chapter without limitations. And for the first time in a long while, I believed I could. The equity, Marcus clarified smoothly, leaning back in his chair. I'm thinking we could set up a buyout over time. I know you don't exactly have liquid assets to purchase my portion outright. The presumption took my breath away. He was leaving me for a woman young enough to call me ma'am, and yet somehow he expected me to pay him while he built his new life with her. A fresh start funded by the woman he just discarded. I need time to think about it, I said evenly, careful to keep my tone neutral. Marcus nodded like a man doing me a favor. Of course. It's a lot to process. But Tiffany and I will need capital soon. I'm sure you understand. Oh, I understood. I understood with perfect clarity that Marcus no longer saw me as a partner or even a person with emotions. He saw me as a bank account, a stepping stone, a utility to be tapped one last time before he moved on. I'll have my attorney reach out, I said, holding his gaze. His eyebrows lifted. You already have an attorney? Camille, that feels a bit adversarial, don't you think? Adversarial, I echoed, letting the words settle like dust in the quiet air. You humiliated me in front of our entire family. On Thanksgiving. That wasn't adversarial. He had the decency to look away, momentarily chastised. I admit the timing wasn't ideal, he muttered. But I needed a clean break. For Tiffany's sake. You mean the Tiffany who deserves a future free of shadows? I asked, watching his nervous glance at his watch, an old habit he developed during budget meetings when he didn't want to hear the hard numbers. She's young, he said defensively. She has her whole life ahead of her. And I don't. The words came sharper than I intended, and his eyes flickered with guilt. That's not what I meant, he said, reaching across the table, attempting a comforting gesture. I pulled my hand away. You'll be fine, Camille. You've always been resilient. Resilient. The word landed between us like a loaded gun. Yes, I had been resilient. During the early years, when money was tight and I returned to work 6 weeks after each baby. During the long nights when Marcus traveled and I balanced full-time work with parenting, meal prep, and remembering to send thank you cards to his clients. I had smiled through every financial crisis, every job transition, every silent dinner after his temper cooled. You're right, I said softly. I am resilient. Something in my voice made him sit back. The false confidence in his face slipped. We should go over the practical matters, he said quickly. Asset division. Support. I've looked at our finances. There are discrepancies, I interrupted, my voice cool. Marcus blinked. Discrepancies? Yes. Specifically, withdrawals. Roughly $47,000 from our joint savings over the last 6 months. His face flushed. Business expenses, he said too quickly. Temporary cash flow issues. I plan to replenish. With what income, Marcus? Your agency has been in decline for 3 years. The flicker of panic in his eyes was all the confirmation I needed. He had been draining our savings to bankroll his new life, Tiffany's lifestyle. Her dinners. Her hotel getaways. Maybe even jewelry. How would you know about the agency's profits? He snapped. I'm an accountant, I replied, sliding my phone across the table, the bank statement already pulled up. I noticed patterns. His jaw tensed as he scanned the numbers. Each withdrawal perfectly aligned with the nights he'd claimed to be working late or on weekend client meetings. He looked up, no longer pretending. Fine, he said coldly. I've been planning my exit. Can you really blame me? 27 years of the same routine. The same dependable, boring. He stopped just short. But I heard the word anyway. Wife. The cruelty was deliberate. Designed to wound. To make me retreat into shame and silence. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. Pursuing the financial discrepancies might have seemed like an empty threat to Marcus, a bluff. Maybe it would have worked a week earlier. But not now. I'd like the money returned, I said, steady and calm. All of it. He gave a short, dismissive laugh. That's not happening. Call it the price of your freedom. Freedom isn't what you're selling, Marcus, I said, my voice cool. It's betrayal, wrapped up in a cheap bow and sold as liberation. His smile faded. You've always been judgmental. No, I replied, I've just always seen you clearly. Tiffany doesn't. But she will. Something in my tone must have struck him, his brows furrowed. Real concern, maybe even fear, flickered in his eyes. What does that mean? Before I could answer, his phone chimed. The screen lit up with the name Tiffany. Go ahead, I said. She's probably dying to hear about your amicable divorce plan. He hesitated, then stepped away from the table to take the call, gesturing in the corner like a man managing optics, not consequences. While he reassured his new girlfriend, I signaled the waiter for the check and began mentally reviewing everything I'd learned from my meeting with Richard Owens that morning. The inheritance was only the tip of the iceberg. Uncle Charles, meticulous even in death, had hired a private investigator a year before his passing. What that investigator uncovered made Marcus's betrayal look like a sideshow. 2 years ago, Marcus had taken out a business loan, a big one, using our house as collateral. He had forged my signature on the documents. That loan was now in default. Suddenly, his eagerness to discuss finances made perfect sense. He wasn't just leaving me for a younger woman. He was trying to flee a financial collapse of his own making, hoping I'd foot the escape bill. In the 2 weeks after our restaurant meeting, I launched a 3-pronged strategy. First, I met with a forensic accountant recommended by Richard to trace and document Marcus's financial misconduct. Second, I hired a divorce attorney, Morin Winters, who specialized in complex, fraud-heavy cases. Third, I took over management of Uncle Charles's business portfolio, learning every detail of the commercial real estate holdings I now owned. During this time, Marcus continued texting me. The messages swung wildly between nostalgic manipulation, remember our anniversary in Sedona? We had magic once, and threats. Tiffany thinks I should get a forensic valuation of your accounting practice. I replied sparingly, playing for time while my own evidence piled up. The forensic accountant found more than I expected. Not only had Marcus defaulted on that fraudulent loan, he'd also opened credit cards in my name, racking up thousands in personal debt. Worse, he had been falsifying records at his mortgage firm, creating fake invoices and inflated commissions. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, all laid out in spreadsheets and audit trails. When I met with Morin, she didn't sugarcoat it. We have enough for criminal prosecution. The question isn't if we can win, it's what you want to happen. What I wanted was layered. Justice, yes. Security, absolutely. But revenge? That wasn't what fueled me. I want a resolution that's fair, I told her. I want this over. And I want my life back without him in it. Morin nodded. We'll file immediately. The inheritance being legally separate simplifies everything. With your assets protected, we can go after the fraudulent activity directly. The plan was unfolding smoothly until Marcus pulled one last stunt. I came home from a meeting at the property management office to find his car in the driveway. And Tiffany. On my front porch. They were laughing. Holding hands. Until they saw me. Tiffany's smile vanished. Marcus cleared his throat and tried to look composed. Just here to grab a few things, he said, motioning toward the house. This isn't your house, I replied calmly, unlocking the door. Not anymore. Then I held it open wide enough for them to enter and for the storm that was about to hit. I wasn't expecting to find them in the bedroom. Marcus was packing cufflinks and watches into a velvet case while Tiffany, barefoot, polished, oblivious, lounged on my bed like she owned it, scrolling through her phone. You must be Camille, she said, not bothering to look up. Marcus has told me so much about you. I stood in the doorway, taking her in. She was pretty in the exact way you'd expect, slim, blonde, with that particular brand of casual confidence that only comes from a life untouched by real disappointment. Her clothes looked expensive and crisp, still clinging to the sheen of recent purchase. $47,000 of sheen, to be precise. Has he told you about the fraud investigation? I asked, my voice sweet as honey. Tiffany's head snapped up. What? Marcus emerged from the closet, his jaw tightening. Camille. That's enough. Enough? I echoed, stepping into the room. Or should I continue with the forged signatures? The defaulted business loan? The credit cards in my name? She's lying, Marcus said quickly. But I heard the catch in his voice, the falter. Am I? I pulled a folder from my bag and held it out to Tiffany. These are copies of the relevant documents. You might want to reconsider tying your bright little future to a sinking ship. Marcus lunged for the folder, but Tiffany was faster. She snatched it from my hand and flipped through the pages, her face paling with every turn. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up a credit card statement. "You told me we were going to Paris. After the divorce." "I can explain," Marcus began, but Tiffany was already backing toward the door, clutching the folder like a lifeline. "You said you were financially secure. You said she was the problem." And, just like that, she was gone. Marcus stood frozen, humiliated, rage burning behind his eyes. "You've ruined everything," he hissed. "No," I replied calmly. "You managed that all by yourself." The next morning, Morin called with unexpected news. "Marcus's new attorney has requested an emergency settlement conference," she said. "He's offering to admit to the fraudulent loan if we agree not to involve law enforcement." Apparently, Tiffany's exit had shattered his illusion of a consequence-free fresh start. With his relationship in ashes and the possibility of criminal charges hanging over him, reality had finally caught up. "You should feel victorious," Morin said gently. But I didn't. I felt hollow. 27 years of marriage ending not with dignity, not with mutual understanding, but with frantic bargaining to avoid prosecution. "What's your recommendation?" I asked. "We're in a powerful position," she said. "We can go after everything, full retirement accounts, the house, restitution for the fraud." The decision came easily. Schedule the conference. But I have conditions. Such as a clean break, total separation, no future contact. Morin hesitated. "No punitive demands? No restitution?" I thought of them in my bedroom. Tiffany sprawled across the bed I'd cried in. The carelessness. The entitlement. How quickly everything I'd built had been reduced to a stage for his performance. "The fraud documentation goes into escrow," I said. "If Marcus abides by the settlement terms, it stays sealed. If not, then there are consequences," Morin finished, her voice edged with respect. "Understood." The conference was scheduled for the following Thursday in Morin's sleek office overlooking the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The view felt symbolic, solid, unmoving, ancient. Marcus arrived alone. His crisp blazers had been replaced with a wrinkled dress shirt. His face was drawn, tired. His expensive watch was conspicuously absent. His attorney, a jittery man with a permanent frown, opened the meeting with conciliatory language. "We believe both parties made mistakes," he said, "and now want to move forward, amicably." Morin gave a razor-edged smile and slid the folder across the table. "Let's be clear," she said. "This is not about mutual mistakes. It's about fraud, identity theft, and financial misrepresentation." Marcus stared at the table. He couldn't even look at me. Marcus's attorney cleared his throat and began, "My client is prepared to offer significant concessions." "That's fortunate," Morin interrupted crisply, "because my client is prepared to file criminal charges." The silence that followed felt sharp and deliberate, like a scalpel poised just above skin. Marcus finally looked at me. The smugness was gone. His eyes held a flicker of resentment, but mostly fear. "What do you want, Camille?" he asked quietly. I opened the folder I'd brought with me, but it didn't contain legal documents or financial spreadsheets. It held photographs. Our wedding day. The kids' first birthdays. The first picture of us in front of the house, before the stucco repairs and landscaping. Snapshots of 27 years of a life built, brick by emotional brick. "I want you to understand what you threw away," I said, my voice steady. "Not just me, but your integrity. Your children's respect. Your professional reputation." His attorney shifted uncomfortably. "Is this really necessary? We're here to discuss settlement terms." "The terms," I said, turning to Marcus, "are simple." I slid a page across the table. "You sign over all rights to the house. You waive any claim to my inheritance, business interests, or retirement accounts. You agree to repay the fraudulent loan and credit card debt in full." Marcus's face drained of color. That's everything. What am I supposed to live on? I slid one final document across the table, a deed. To this, I said, a commercial property outside Santa Fe, recently purchased with a portion of my inheritance. It's where your mortgage office operates. He blinked. You bought the building? I did. The lease is paid for 5 years. Consider it your fresh start, Marcus. More than you deserve. Less than you expected. His eyes widened as the reality set in. You own my building. I own a lot of things now, I replied calmly. Sign the papers. 6 months after the Thanksgiving that ended my marriage, I stood in the lobby of Trent Properties, watching workers finish installing the new company signage. The commercial real estate firm I had inherited from Uncle Charles now bore my name, a symbolic reclamation of my identity. Marcus signed the divorce documents that cold January afternoon, his hand shaking as he accepted the terms. His plan to exit our marriage triumphantly had instead left him exposed, humbled, and alone. Tiffany never returned. She had calculated the risks quickly and realized a financially ruined, scandal-ridden man wasn't the catch he promised to be. Our children processed the betrayal in different ways. Elise remained distant, polite but guarded, agreeing to the occasional lunch with her father, but refusing to engage beyond surface-level conversations. Jeremy, after his initial anger cooled, settled into a cautiously limited relationship, cordial but emotionally detached. Both of them, however, expressed something I hadn't expected. Pride. You didn't let him destroy you, Elise had said one evening over Thai takeout. That's what he wanted, wasn't it? To break you, so he wouldn't have to feel guilty. Maybe she was right. Maybe the public announcement, the timing, the cruelty, it had all been staged to cast me as the abandoned wife, making his actions easier to justify to others and to himself. But I didn't crumble. Instead, I rebuilt. Stronger, wealthier, and remarkably whole. The financial skills I'd honed over decades in accounting were now applied to growing my own portfolio. In my first 6 months, I added 3 new commercial properties to Uncle Charles's holdings, each one a quiet declaration of independence. Marcus's mortgage firm still operated in my building. Our only contact now was a monthly auto deposit labeled rent, a reminder of how far the balance had shifted. Word got around. His attempts at online dating hadn't gone well. Women his age found his past too messy. Younger women weren't interested when they realized the champagne lifestyle had gone flat. As the crew outside packed up, my phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Dinner with Richard Owens. We were reviewing scholarship candidates for the Education Foundation. This year, I'd doubled the number of recipients. Because rebuilding isn't just about reclaiming power. It's about passing it on. This year, the Foundation's focus was on women pursuing degrees in finance, accounting, and business, especially those returning to school after major life changes. Empowering women to gain financial independence felt personal now. Deeply personal. Outside, spring had transformed Santa Fe. The desert was waking up, pinyon trees greening, wildflowers dotting the hills, adobe walls glowing warm under the April sun. The sharp edges of winter had softened, and so had I. At 54, I was starting over not with regret or resignation, but with anticipation, curiosity, and a hard-earned clarity about the difference between value and worth. For years, I'd assigned my worth to the roles I filled: wife, mother, accountant, peacemaker. Now, I was learning to define it on my own terms. I owned a growing business, managed a legacy, and funded futures for young women like the one I used to be, driven but cautious, full of potential but uncertain of permission. Now, I gave that permission freely. To them. To myself. The future stretched before me, unwritten, unmapped, and entirely my own. If my story resonated with you, even a little, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part hit home, what made you think, or what gave you hope. Whether you faced betrayal, started over, or simply questioned your own worth, I want you to know you're not alone. For years, I believed that quiet endurance was strength. That sacrificing for others without complaint was love. That holding a marriage together with duct tape and denial somehow made me admirable. But real strength? It's in letting go when you're being diminished. It's in choosing peace over performance. It's in rebuilding not out of bitterness, but from the belief that you still matter. So I ask you, what in your life needs reclaiming? Maybe it's your voice, your time, your dignity. Maybe it's that dream you tucked away because someone else convinced you it didn't fit your role. Here's what I've learned. Your value isn't tied to how long you endured something. It's tied to how bravely you walk away when it's no longer serving you. Support women who rise after the fall. Encourage those who are finding the courage to start over. And if you're in the middle of your own storm, know this, you can come through it stronger. Not broken, but rebuilt. Just like I did.